Welcome to This Time in History, guys. I'm Matthew, and this was supposed to be the Ward 16 Don Valley East debate. But as you can see, not a lot of people showed up. In fact, only one showed up. So we're going to do a special interview with Ward 16 candidate, Mr. Walter Alvarez-Bardales. I hope I said that right.
Perfectly.
Perfect. I have a tendency, unfortunately, to mess up names. I've been told I have an accent, but oh well.
You did very well, actually.
I'd love to hear about your campaign, about why you're running. I usually ask the candidates, why are you running? Why this election? Why now? You can tell me about your platform, about your community engagement, and your door knocking, and now I'm going to throw it to you. Start anywhere you like.
Okay, thank you. Well, a lot of questions there, but I always like to start from the basics, tell you a little bit about my life. And one thing that I want the voters to know is that I grew up during a war, and it was a horrible, a very brutal civil war in Guatemala, where I was born, where, according to the United Nations, genocide was committed. And because my father fought for human rights during the dictatorships, it cost us a lot of hardship and persecution. So we decided as a family that for my safety, it was best for me to leave Guatemala when I was very young. And so I did. And I embarked on my journey to Canada, which was full of adversity. I experienced homelessness for a few days, and I was hungry on the streets of Toronto. But I think two things there: the resilience and the that desire to keep fighting that my father instilled in me, and my own resilience, but also the compassion of the people of Toronto is what lifted me up from those humble beginnings. And currently, I am a doctoral candidate, recipient of multiple scholarships, and I'm also a civil servant with 10 years of experience. And I've been volunteering in every capacity to help people. In particular, my advocacy for human rights is with regards to healthcare access. That's the what I'm studying in my PhD. And unfortunately, as great as this country is, and I love this country with all my heart, I noticed that there are things that are causing structures of discrimination. And that's what I learned through my PhD. But in terms of why I'm running, is precisely to address those structures of inequalities that we have still going on in this great country, where the people are good, but sometimes there is a disconnect between the compassion of the people and the public policies that allow the structures of discrimination. Now, with particularly to Don Valley East, I saw a need for compassionate leadership there, because I noticed that the advocacy there by the current councillor, it excludes advocating for people that are renters, for people that are poor, or in other words, the least amongst us. And I say that with not as a way of patronizing anybody, because I was the least among you when I came to Canada. And I made something out of myself because of the compassion of the people. But I think in terms of government, we could show more compassion to the poor, so that people in the poor and middle classes flourish, and we can be the best city that we can be. But there is still a space for improvement at the city level. Also, I find that the city council is not representative of the diversity that exists in Toronto. Yet city council is not very diversified in terms, and I'm not just talking race, but ideologically speaking, it seems to be too far to the right. So I'm hoping to bring a little bit of balance with my progressive views, Matthew.
Thank you so much. And I love the story. What about let's talk about your platform. I'd love to know whatever you can tell me or want to tell me. And then for your community engagement? Have you started your door knocking, and what kinds of things are you hearing at the door or when you talk to people in your community?
Um, they're actually related because my platform, I created my platform before I started canvassing, but I did some research about the issues, and I find I, I found that what I researched priorly, it's exactly what I encounter at the door. So what I mean in a few words is that some of the main issues that people are facing in Toronto are affordability. And affordability comes in many ways, and the most prominent one is house affordability. People cannot afford to pay rent, or in some cases they do pay rent, but here is the misfortune is that a lot of the people that I've been knocking on their doors, they're telling me that they had to make hard choices, and the choices are heartbreaking because it entails either eating 3 meals a day or pay rent or um, pay for recreation. It's not even something that it's uh, taking into account because the basic necessities are being very hard to be met by these people. So either food or rent or medicine, but they cannot afford all three items simultaneously, and that breaks my heart. And that's where I believe it's urgent that we address the needs of the poor. And one prominent aspect of my platform is to advocate for rent freezes in Toronto. Now, you will hear that this is not entirely a city issue. True, but nothing precludes city council from advocating to the Ontario government for rent freezes. But that's just one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that there are housing corporations that receive subsidies from the city of Toronto. And in those types of housing, there is the ability for city council to do rent freezes. So that's one of the main things that I'm advocating. And of course, the construction of more affordable housing. And also,
I'm just going to jump in for a second.
sure.
When you say affordable housing, I always like to get your definition, because I think that the definite people's definition is different, and I'd love to know yours. For me, the definition would be um, geared more towards renting. When people hear affordable housing, and it's for sale, but what about for rent? And I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And it's almost like you read my mind because when I talk about affordable housing, I'm talking about the vast majority of the people in my ward. They're renters. So perhaps I should have said it explicitly, but that's exactly who I'm referring to. Is 55% of the people in my ward are renting, and at the moment they cannot even dream about buying a home. They're just too expensive, and that's a nationwide global problem. But speaking of the affordable housing that I'm talking about, is my own definition is that anybody who's in this great city of Toronto, and whatever their creed, whatever their sexual preference, whatever their race, whatever their immigration status, even, in my opinion, I'm a human rights advocate, so I'm a little biased in favor of human rights, but I believe that all those groups that I mentioned, and also the homeless populations, are entitled to have a safe, clean, and affordable housing. And affordable meaning that they shouldn't have to choose between paying rent and having food on their table. They should be able to afford all the basic necessities, including rent, including food, including medicine. And ideally, they would have a little bit of money to uh, recreate themselves because it's part of the mental health issue. But at the very least, the three basic necessities: food, shelter, medicine, and healthcare. That's the way I envision affordable housing.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
And you're right. We need more. It's not like, unfortunately, it's not like TCHC is going to run out and build a bunch of low income housing. I think that's not going to happen anymore. Um, Anyway, let's talk about some budget issues. I'd love to hear what you think. You know, we do have that $1.6 billion backlog in TCHC repairs. You know, and TTC says they're going to be $500 million short in their funding, according to their own numbers. And but it's not dire enough that Mr. CEO doesn't get a 21% increase. I'd love to hear anything that you want to say about the budget, what you'd like to see happen, and what do you see for the budget in the next 4 years term of council?
Excellent question, by the way. And one thing that I want to be honest with voters is that no single councillor has the power to fix the budget in isolation, but we can be effective advocates. And in my case, I would give priority to find friendly progressive councillors, because see, if I win or whoever wins in my ward, it's a ward of 100,000 people, right? But if say that we get 5-6 sympathetic councillors, now we're representing 600,000 people in Toronto. So our advocacy carries more weight. So in my public service, I have learned to be an effective advocate, and that is something that you learn with experience also, that you cannot do it alone. But once you find sympathetic counselors, what you can do is number one, and this is where most people start talking about cutting funding or saving here and there. But the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that the status quo doesn't take steps backwards to make it even worse. So the situation is more dire than people think. For example, I have it from good sources that some city employees, under the orders of John Tory, have already started preliminary studies about privatizing Toronto Hydro. And whether that's is that something that they have in their plans in the future? I don't know. But what I do know is that there's been preliminary studies on the matter. And the thing that I'm concerned about is that I don't know the type of, like I hope those studies are objective, because common sense would dictate that when you have an asset that's producing income, because Toronto Hydro is producing income in the form of dividends, privatization is not to the benefit of the citizens of Toronto. Is, for example, like you having a rental property that gives you $1,000 a month, then you sell it, then you get 50,000 in one shot, and then what? Then you're done, and then you're gonna run into future deficits down the road. So, and I'm just using that as an example, Matthew, but the first thing is for us to hold the line so that things don't get worse, and that is by way of opposing any efforts at privatizing. And Toronto Hydro is just one of the examples of the things that there's been rumors about privatization. And some are not rumors, as you know. For example, the garbage collection from Yonge Street going west, it was privatized, and it was that was the pet project of the current councillor at Ward 16. And this goes back 8 years ago, I think, or more. But the big enticement, the way he sold it, is, oh, we're gonna save some more money, we're gonna save so much more money, make it more efficient, etc. And now City of Toronto employees conducted a study in which they concluded that privatization didn't save any money. In fact, it cost more. So perhaps it's my political ideology, or perhaps it's me being a scientist and an MBA that, sorry, a future scientist. I'm not a PhD yet, but I believe that history has proven that when you privatize those services that are so sacred, so essential for the people, especially the poor people, like Toronto Hydro, water, libraries, long-term care, when they get privatized, the people don't benefit. They actually suffer more. So to answer your question, and I'm sorry to give you such a complex answer.
No,
but
I love it. I love it. Keep going.
Okay, so the first thing is progressive councillors need to hold the line and say no privatization to city services. That's one. another step that I would like to take is to find out where we're wasting money. So I mentioned the garbage, but
So,
some
well, I just want to jump in for a second.
absolutely.
I'll let you finish, but
Okay.
I live in Ward 1, Etobicoke North. So I'll say that for me, it was Rob Ford that privatized the garbage west of Yonge. For me, Etobicoke was privatized long before that. So honestly, I I couldn't tell you what the cost is. I know it's always picked up. I've never had an issue. I don't even have to call 311 when I put a couch out on the curb. They just take it. But sorry, I'll let you finish. I just wanted to let you know that my situation, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, no problem. But the thing is, and most citizens don't pay attention because whether it's private or city owned, but somebody picks it up and everything works. But where I have a problem with is when they sell it to you as a way of, we're gonna privatize it and it's gonna save you money, Mr. Citizen, when it's not, when it's actually gonna cost more, and it's going to the pockets of private companies. And that's what I have an issue when the citizen is misled. It's even if the services are the same, um, but they're costing more. That's what I have an issue with. And they're selling it to you in a different take, that they're saving you money, but they're not. So thanks for the feedback, though. That's pretty interesting to hear about different views about that, right?
Yeah.
But other, so I was saying holding the line, no privatization unless there is sufficient evidence that could provide the basis of like an actual forecast that it's going to save money for, like, but in reality, in actuality, not as a political maneuver. But for the most part, I'm of the opinion that essential services should remain within city, provincial, and federal control. Now, there are ways to save money also. And one thing that I would like to look at is the excessive salaries that some city employees get. And
Absolutely. That's where you
yeah,
start. Because let me tell you something. I've been doing these interviews for 6 months, and I knew stuff before that because I've always wanted to run. So I always pay attention. I mean, I pay attention to all the politics, but specifically municipally, I try to pay attention as well as I can. I have a full-time job, so I can never go to a council meeting, but I read the paper. I try to stay in tune. And this last 6 months has been, I basically gotten a college education in politics. And the one thing that I've learned many things, but one of the big things that I've learned is, and I'm sure you know this as well, the fish stinks from the head. The head of all the files, the head of the TTC, the head of the TCHC, the head of Toronto Hydro, that I could go on. Too much money. I would like to see at least the salaries lowered and some of this middle management to go away. There's too much management.
I agree. And one thing that we lost along the way, because I've heard the counter argument that, well, executives in the private sector make the same or more, et cetera, et cetera. But here is what I had to say about that is, in my case, I'm a civil servant, and I completed an MBA on top of my class. I was a salutatorian, meaning second to the valedictorian. So I have a high academic pedigree, in all humility. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because with my credentials, I could have gone the private sector to make a lot of money. And yet I chose the path of public service. I've been a public servant for the last 10 years because to me, it is the highest honor and privilege there is. You don't do it for the money. And if we are attracting people because they're going to make so much money, I find it incongruent with the philosophy that public servants should have, where it's not about the money. And I find it frankly excessive, and it's costing too much money to the citizens of Toronto. And it's a slap on the face for example, I believe the head of the TTC is making, it was approaching 400,000 the last time I checked per year. And imagine, to the people that I speak with every day, the ones that are having to choose between food or rent, how would they feel knowing that somebody who it's the head of a city corporation that had a deficit is being rewarded with such a high salary?
Not to mention, you said 400, approaching 400,000. That he makes more than the mayor. The mayor should be the top earner in the city. No or yes?
Yes, yeah. And and for somebody to make twice what the mayor makes, and you know what? It's not like we are impressed with their performance. Well, he's making 400,000 per year or more, and at least TTC is efficient. It doesn't have a deficit, and people are not waiting for their boss. But the services are bad, and he keeps getting rewarded. And he's just one example of the many. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure that a city councilor can say they're going to make less money, but a city councilor does have the ability to do an inquiry into the salaries, to speak with other councilors, because in my opinion, it needs to be reviewed. And serving the public should be a reward in and of itself, not a way for executives to go and get rich. Serving the public, being a public servant, means more than that to me philosophically.
And that's a great segue to our next little topic I wanted to talk about. So I want to hit a little bit on the unhoused and the situation that happened in Trinity Bellwoods, in Lamport, and in Alexander Park. There's a public outcry for the next councillors that get elected to put forth a motion to either fire interim city manager Tracy Cook or ask for her resignation, because it was her directive. She took full responsibility, and people are angry. People are pissed off at her. And I'm just wondering what you think of that in terms of cleaning up the cleaning up City Hall. I think that, you know, one candidate says they should rip all the answering machines out of City Hall and people should be answering their phones. Anything you want to say in terms of the better, I guess maybe Rob Ford said it the best, I'm not sure, customer service that needs to happen at City Hall? Anything you want to say on that?
Well, I be interested in talking a little bit about Tracy Cook, and perhaps it's because I'm a former homeless person and a homeless advocate, where, in my view, and with the evidence that's public information, the evidence that I can see, there is just, there's been more than one mistake. It's what we call in science a potential pattern. And I'll give you a couple of examples. She took responsibility for the handling of the evictions, which in my view were very violent, were disrespectful of the human rights of both the homeless people and the peaceful protesters. And she took full responsibility, but because she's assuming responsibility, she should also be accountable, because there were human rights violations. Many people were injured. Many people that are today's city council candidates, including they were hurt. And there was a woman that was
It's also Ward 11 candidate Adam Golding.
Yes,
he was arrested in Lamport.
Yeah, and he was injured. So, but let's say that could be it's a complex situation. So I made one mistake, but no, I found a potential pattern, because then there is the issue of she forbade the press from being there during the operations. So in other words, for once in my life, I I thought back of the era of dictatorship in which I grew up, where the press were not allowed to do their job. And when there is no press, there is no freedom and there is no democracy. And for some arbitrary reason that only she knows, she did not allow the press to be there and report and record what was going on.
What I want to know is why an unelected official is calling the shots. Where was the mayor? Or was the mayor hiding in his office?
I suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that the political powers that be made it known to what they want done, and then they have certain city officials that love to do whatever it takes to preserve their privilege, including harassing the poor. And I'm sorry, but this appears to be just a clear case of, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to please the powers that be. And
So
I
what
agree
kind
with you. They shouldn't be calling the shots.
so what kinds of things can we do to clean up City Hall? As I mentioned, one candidate said rip the answering machines out, improve the customer service. You know, I'll tell you specifically, my ward, well, but that's because we have no current counselor. I don't really count the one that was appointed as our counselor. And I used to live in Ward 3 for 13 years. And I have a lot of respect for Mark Grimes. I really, really do. But I can never get a hold of him.
Yeah.
Can't get a hold of John Tory. Never. Um, Accessibility is a huge issue. No one's accessible. I heard one time someone told me if you're supporting someone like in an election, for example, and you can't get them on the phone, they're not accessible before the election, during the election, then they're not going to be accessible after the election. What do you
I
think of
agree.
yeah?
I agree 100%, and that's also part of the gap that I found in Ward 16 that made me run, because in Ward 16 we don't even have a constituency office. Can you believe that? So you can, if you want to speak in person with your counselor one day, you had to take the trip to downtown to City Hall, and perhaps he will see you. But the fact that there are wards that don't have a constituency office, it's another slap on the face of the citizens of those wards. And that's part of my platform, by the way. Should I get elected? And I have so many ideas, but I know it's up to the voters. But if I have the privilege of getting elected within 100 days, I want to have a constituency office in the ward with one full-time staff member, and with the promise of getting back to the citizens when they have an inquiry in no longer than 48 hours. And I said,
it's funny you mentioned that. Now that I think about it, to the best of my recollection, and I've said this before, I'm wrong a lot, but on this one, I don't think I'm wrong. Mark Grimes never had a constituency office,
no.
so I feel your pain there.
And you know what? And of course, they'll sell it to you with the philosophy of saving money, or the excuse of saving money, and it's incredible, because a constituency office is just pales in comparison to the money that could be saved just by slashing excessive salaries, for example. So what I suspect it is that they prefer not to be accountable to the constituents, because you'll notice the doors start knocking during election time, and like in my ward, after the election, they don't see their councilor very often, and that needs to change. And having a constituency office is a first excellent step, in my opinion, and I would be sure that that happens within 100 days.
Absolutely. Let's move along to crime. I want to talk about crime and the police. I'm interested to know your opinion on the crime rate in Toronto, what you think about the job that the Toronto police have done. I'm just going to ask all my questions now, and then I'll let you talk. And what we can do in terms of maybe urban design methods or after school programs to try to cut down on crime. And as well, one last question. There's a mayoral candidate running right now who says that if he gets elected, he's going to reinstall carding as a tool for the Toronto police to use. And I'd love to know how you would respond to this and why. So you can start any of the four questions I just asked. Go ahead.
Okay. And you know what? I'll start answering. And if I forget one of the questions, I'll ask you again. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. But I'll answer the carding one first because that's very close to my heart to answer that question because I'm 100% against carding. And I'll tell you why. Number one, because it doesn't work. It's been proven that it doesn't work. And number two, it's just an excuse to provide tools to the police to oppress the poor, to conduct racial profiling on people based on their appearance, the way they look, the neighborhoods in which they live, and even the race. And it's just something that it only elicits racism. And I'll give you an example. You might find it interesting, but I was watching the story of a young lawyer, black brother. Let me clarify that when I call Black, Indigenous, or Latinos brothers and sisters, it's not in a patronizing manner. I am racially all of the above. I'm of mixed background, including African, Indigenous, and Spanish. So just as a clarification, it's not in a patronizing way. But going back to the story, young brother, young Black Canadian, very eloquent, and he got carded. They carded him, and as an eloquent lawyer that he is, he asked why what he was selected for carding, how the information was going to be used. To make it a short story, through the Freedom of Information Act, this young lawyer got a hold of the information that was put on that card, and on the card it said nationality Jamaican. Nothing wrong with being Jamaican, but just to let you know how prejudicial the information gets translated into what's put on the card, actually. So nationality, Jamaican, attitude, aggressive. And aggressive, I saw the young man speak at an interview. He has the eloquence that I wish I could have, and I'm a PhD candidate. You should have heard this young man. But that's just an example of how prejudicial carding is. Not to mention that it's in direct violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I don't remember exactly the articles, but they preclude unlawful search and seizure, arbitrary detention. So if somebody is trying to bring back carding, I would question what else is in their platforms. Like, this is not the 1960s, and we should get with the times. We should eliminate racism, not elicit it by backwards practices such as carding.
I agree.
And, yep. So that's on carding. Can you remind me of the other question? Sorry.
So I was wondering your opinion on the crime rate for the city of Toronto, the job that you think the police have done to date, and my other question escapes me now, but I'll think of it.
Okay, sounds good, and then I'll answer this one. And
oh, sorry, it was what kind of urban design or social programs do you think can be used to curb the crime? That's what
okay. So I'll talk about the police first, and this is where people get surprised because I'm not anti-police. In fact, I do believe that the vast majority of officers, the brave women and men in the Toronto Police Force, I believe that they're essentially good, the vast majority of them. And there are a few rotten apples, but the problem it's higher than the police. The problem is with the politicians that enable a culture of enforcement at all cost, and that tends to uh, get misconstrued as an okay to be aggressive, and that degenerates into other awful things that are present in police forces that don't get the right directions from the politicians. So it is the culture. It's more the responsibility of the politicians in charge, because they're the ones that are giving the orders. And in terms of the structures of discrimination, it's the politicians that are responsible. Now, having said that, we need to create a culture where there is accountability about the few bad police officers that racial profile people, that commit abuses, etc. There has to be an accountability, and I don't agree with giving a blank check or do a blanket statement in any group of people that everyone is good. In every group of people, there is good and bad. The majority are good, but the few bad, rotten apples, they need to be accountable. And I hope you have time if I tell you a brief story.
Of course.
Okay, so I'll tell you why I'm so certain that the majority of police officers are good, because I've seen the good in them. I have a rescue dog, and I went hiking once, and I got lost, and it was quite scary, and I thought that I was gonna die, right? But I managed to call the police, and they came and saved me. And they were so sweet to my dog. On the one hand, on the other, when I was a new immigrant to Canada, I was racially profiled. I was stopped by a police officer, and then he looked at my name, and he asked me, "Are you some kind of a Mexican?" What? Look at my name, some kind of a Mexican. So
Yeah.
it was not very nice. But the point I'm trying to make is that I've seen the good and the bad, and the majority is good. So they're doing a good job, but the politicians need to do a better job of creating an atmosphere of respect for human rights. And to be fair with the police force, I believe they're overworked because they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Like, they shouldn't be tending to overdose calls, for example, when somebody's overdosed. And that's not an enforcement situation, or issues of homelessness. That's where we should have a way. And I believe that Toronto City Council has a pilot in place for certain things. It is community engagement and community support services that engages civilian non-emergencies. So the police force can do what they do best, which is to serve and protect us when the situation calls for it, when there is danger to life, for example. That's when they need to act, and we're grateful to them for putting themselves at risk to protect us. But there are certain things that they shouldn't be doing, and they're doing these days, right? Including the removal of homeless people. I think it's not fair to the police. I bet you there are officers that disagree with doing what they're doing, but it's their job. So it's up to the politicians, to city council, to make sure that things are done properly. But I find it a bit disheartening, and this is why I run the race as well. For example, when the removal of homeless people from the encampments happened, I think it was Councillor Layton that requested an investigation to see if there were human rights violations. And unfortunately, only 3 or 4 councillors voted in favor of the motion. So it's a very complex issue, but it's solvable. It's solvable by way of redirecting the police force to situations where there needs to be a police force, but that's not for people with addictions, mental illnesses, and homeless issues, for example. I think we can redirect and change their mandate so that we can also save money, because I bet you that's going to free up resources that we can use for community support programs.
Absolutely. And in terms of social programs or urban design methods we can use to try to curb crime. Because, you know, excuse me, I've been told, poverty is the number one reason that the number one motivator for crime. It's not always, but it is often. What do you say to that?
I agree. And the thing is that desperation breeds crime, lack of opportunities breeds crime. And we've been very good at um, enforcing and combating crime with a gun, but rarely you hear politicians talk about the causes of crime. And the causes of crime are lack of opportunities, poverty, misery. I've seen so much poverty canvassing in the poorest region, the poorest part of my ward. And I can tell you that there needs to be more community support programs. In particular, what I'm interested in, it would be in youth at risk programs where we provide them with mentors, with opportunities, with mental health support. And I adopted also something that I heard from a different candidate, so it's not to my credit, but I can't recall who proposed this, but somebody suggested to stop the expulsion of students and the suspensions and expulsions, that they should be suspended. And I agree. I agree that we shouldn't, people that are already youth, that is already at risk, and if we kick them out of school, we're just putting them on a downward spiral, on a fast path to crime. So we need to actually take the opportunity to support them more, to give them, to see what we can do for them, because there are issues of problems at home typically that, if they're properly addressed, that might convert somebody from a life of crime to a productive life, right? So it's a question of opportunity and community programs of support.
Absolutely. And to close out tonight, I just want to touch briefly on the pandemic. I'd love to know your opinion on how the city handled the pandemic at the municipal level, of course. If you think we've learned anything from the pandemic, and ultimately, in your opinion, do you think we would be ready for another pandemic? Go ahead.
I think that the pandemic is it was such an awful thing that nobody was prepared for it, and I think the city council did the best that they could. I don't think that city council, when it comes to emergencies like that, I think they care for doing the best they could, and I think they did an acceptable job. And in terms of, are we ready for another pandemic? I hope we are. I hope we are. And that's something where one of my platforms is that we should have better collaboration, because in issues like a pandemic or the issue of homelessness, there has to be the political will to work in unity at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. But unfortunately, there is a little bit of a lack of political will. But to be fair, it was kind of refreshing in the beginning of the pandemic, where Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford were working together very well, at least very brief, for a brief period of time, and that proves that it is possible. And I don't have enough data to let you know for a fact to if we're ready, but we should be, and that's where I hope the current politicians are doing their job to prepare us. And if I win, I will make sure that I would review the policies in place, because there are threats of future pandemics, not just the coronavirus type, but monkeypox, others that are unfortunately emerging, right? And we should be ready. We should. It's such a complex problem, because right now, what concerns me, and since I'm studying healthcare access, is that our hospitals are not in very good shape. And again, there is insidious talk of privatization as the solution. And I hope that the three levels of government truly do what's best for the citizens. And
When you, sorry, just real quickly, when you say that the hospitals are not in good shape, do you mean like they're overrun, they're full?
well, I'll give you an example. I had an incident that a few weeks ago that required me to go to the hospital, to the ER, and I had to wait hours to be until I got seen by a doctor. But the thing is, what concerns me is that there were people with chest pains, with things that require immediate care, but they just didn't have the staff. The hospital that I went to see didn't have the staff, and it's not a fault of their own. That they're doing what they can, but with, for example, now we're talking provincial policy, but with Bill 187, or the one where Doug Ford cut the salaries of the brave nurses and healthcare workers, they're living in throes. Like, nurses are leaving the profession, and you can see it if you have the bad luck or the misfortune or the occasion to go to a hospital for an emergency like I did. And it's heartbreaking, and it should be addressed, and that's more of a provincial.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because I'm not sure if you're aware, but I mean you're in the Don Valley, so I mean you're maybe I don't know, but so the point I'm trying to make is Scarborough hospitals specifically are feeling the heat because I'm not sure if you're aware, but Pickering has no hospital. So the citizens of Pickering, and by the way, that's growing every day because they have 75 new condo towers slated to be built in the next few years. They have no hospital. They if they need something, they either have to go to Ajax or they have to go to Scarborough. And like you said, our hospitals are overwhelmed, and I'd love to hear what I know that's not your ward, but I'd love to hear your opinion on that matter.
My opinion is that it is the state's responsibility to care for the basic needs and rights of its citizens. And the right to health is one fundamental human right, in my opinion. And when the state fails to provide those services, it is disheartening, because that's the whole purpose of the state, is to help its citizens, to provide them with basic services. And I was not aware that they didn't have a hospital, and I experienced uh, the dire situation of the hospitals when I went, and it's something that it's urgent. And you know what breaks my heart is that you'll hear the argument that oh, it's because there is not enough money. There is money, it's just being allocated to other things. For example, the construction of highways that are only going to serve commuters 30 seconds per ride, billions of dollars. So the money is there. It's just it seems like there is this culture of bill, bill, bill. Let's make it more like the United States, where our national treasure is the universal health care. We should treat it as such and protect it. And it's something that we can save. I've studied the issue, and there are ways to save it. I just hope that the three levels of government work in unison. But the problem is there are so many different ideologies. Like I'm sure you heard that many services are being privatized.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's going to cost more money to the taxpayers, and it's not going to improve any services.
Absolutely.
Investing in the good men and women, medical and nursing professionals that provide the services, investing in them, retaining the talent is what will help. But getting beds, I saw an announcement by Doug Ford where he said, oh, it's 200, 500 more beds. Yeah, but the beds alone don't serve any purpose if there are no doctors and nurses to help the patients, right?
Absolutely.
So very complex, but I don't want the citizens to lose hope, because I studied the issue, and if there is a political will, and I don't know if it's going to happen with this current provincial government, but there is hope. It could be repaired, the healthcare system.
Well, Walter, this has been so great. I always love talking to candidates, especially, the first time. This has been amazing. Why don't you talk directly to the voters now? Tell them why they should vote for you, and don't forget to include your website and any other pertinent information that you wanted to add.
Thank you so much. So to the citizens of Don Valley East, if you're watching this, I just wanted to let you know that I'm running to be your counselor for various reasons, but the main reason is because I want to serve you with honor. I am a believer of being a public servant, being one of the highest privileges. And essentially, since this city, these people of Toronto saved my life in a way because I was a refugee, I want to give back. But it's not just a matter of giving back. I also have the academic achievement, the civil servant experience, and the volunteer experience to be a good, effective advocate for you. So I want you to keep that in mind, and also know that I'm not doing this looking to see what, if I can paraphrase JFK, looking to find what the city of Toronto can do for me in terms of benefits, perks. I would actually, if a progressive candidate promotes the reduction of unnecessary and excessive perks for councillors, I would vote for that motion. But what I'm doing here to do is to see what I can do for you out of gratitude, because to me, it would be a great honor. And now it's up to you, and whoever you vote for and whoever wins, I wish them success. And my website is www.vote4. Actually, my apologies. I messed up my website, so let me start over.
Yeah, definitely.
www.alvarez, like my last name, 4, counselor.com. So alvarez4counselor.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter at vote_Alvarez. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for coming on. I just want to make a couple announcements real quick. Number one, so as part of the podcast, this time in history, we're going to have our quote unquote election finale episode live on YouTube this Saturday, October the 15th. I'd love anyone that's listening, anyone that can hear the sound of my voice, can see me on this camera. Join in, because I promise you, you do not want to miss this. There's going to be some stuff said, maybe some hurt feelings, but I will be endorsing candidates, and I cannot wait to get all this stuff that I've been building up for the last 6 months off my chest. Also, after the election, when I come back from North Carolina, I don't know, Walter, if I told you, but we're taking a family vacation to North Carolina. And when I come back, I'm going to continue with this podcast, but we're also going to start another podcast, and it's going to be specifically following municipal politics every day. Or sorry, it'll be once a week, but you know what I mean? Like, and we are going to hold the municipal council. We're going to hold them accountable, no matter who the mayor is. If we don't think they're doing a good job, we're going to say it. If we think they're doing a great job, we'll say that as well. It's not always going to be us against them. We just want to make sure that the citizens of Toronto are represented. And right now, we don't get that. We haven't got it for 8 years. So again, I just want to thank you for coming on and doing this interview. The other guys missed out. I had fun.
I had lots of fun, Matthew. And just quickly, I want to thank you for what you do for democracy, because this is such a good format. I saw the mayoral debate that you sponsored, and you know what? It's so good for democracy. So I wish your podcast and your channel all the best and success.
Thank you.
It's already growing. It's growing very rapidly. So.
I'll tell you, the mayoral debate, that was the very first debate I ever did. So I learned a lot of do's and don'ts from that one specifically. And I've tried to carry it forward, and I look forward to doing more of it in the future. You never know what the future is going to hold. And again, I just want to thank you, and I wish you nothing but luck on your campaign trail. We're almost there. It's almost over. And I'll be in North Carolina, but I'm going to be glued to my computer on the 24th. I'll be watching, and I'm excited to see what happens, for the city of Toronto. I love this city. I'm excited for Don Valley as well, for Ward
Thank,
16.
thank you so much, Matthew, for having me.